All right. I see my next guest in the background. I'm going to bring him in. Colonel Wilkerson, how you doing, man? You doing okay this morning?
I think so. Let me check my pulse. Yeah,
Hopefully, you're doing well.
yeah, I'll
It
be
is my
81 in
highest.
January.
Yeah,
Uh,
it is my
I
highest
never
hope to
thought
hear
I'd
you.
make it past 70, so 11 years.
Really, really.
Getting
I
more
know in my
decrepit
wedding.
every day.
Well, I know during my marriage, I thought I was dying, so there's that. So I guess I can kind of get it. But 70, no, you're kicking, you're alive and well. Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, he is former distinguished visiting professor of government and public policy at the College of William and Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia. He taught 6 years at the University Honors Program at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. He is also, and probably best known as retired United States Army Colonel and former Chief of Staff to United States Secretary of State Colin Powell. Thank you for joining me, man.
Good to
I,
be with you.
well, obviously, the thing that's hit the news is the 28-point peace plan. That is the thing that people are effectively talking about. What has brought us to this point where an administration that initially went from tomahawks to ceasefire to now, okay, here's the 28-point plan. We need you to take it, and we demand that you take the plan according to Reuters. Anyway, give me your thoughts.
That's one of the questions of the hour, I think, if you're examining national security for America and the empire. I think I was wrong in there at a couple of places, and I think I can say that categorically because I've listened to Sergei Lavrov explain where I was wrong. And let me clarify that.
Yeah.
In Alaska, and I could go all the way back to Helsinki, really, in the first term, but in Alaska, more was accomplished, I think, than perhaps we critics initially thought. And when I say more, it was essentially an agreement between Putin and Trump that was, as anything could be with Trump, pretty firm. And I say that with guarded optimism, that not only was a ceasefire out of the question, but it was going to be complicated and difficult, and Europeans were going to throw rocks all the way down the road, and Ukraine too. But we needed a plan that would work. And then they established Budapest a little bit early. And so when Marco Rubio called and talked with Sergei Lavrov at length, and this is what I was really wrong about, Sergei explicated it for me, if you will, and I believe he's telling the truth. Most often he does. It was really a very positive phone call. It wasn't a brusque, typical Marco Rubio, go to hell, Sergei, I don't need to talk to you. It
Right.
really was a fundamentally helpful telephone call. And they both realized that the United States in particular was not ready for such a complicated set of talks that would follow and that would happen in Budapest to make that series start. And this was going to cover everything from New START and renewal of it and working on a new nuclear weapons treaty regime, which is very, very important. And it is important to Russia. And I think it's becoming important to the empire. Not only that, they talked about really putting together something Trump hasn't done before. And his cabinet, apparently under Marco Rubio's guidance, I assume, as national security advisor, is working on this. Genuine working groups of experts, if there are any left in the U.S. government, who would work out the details like any summit would normally do. We've not done any of this. We've just had meetings, telephone calls, and then Trump goes his own way. And it's very frustrating for Putin. It's very frustrating for the Europeans. It's very frustrating for everybody in the world dealing with the empire. But this time, they apparently at least laid out a plan, and the 28-point plan, so to speak, codifies that at least initially. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking forward to some productive talks, I hope, in Budapest.
Yeah, so do I. I mean, always trust is one of the issues associated with this. I would imagine there's probably none left from the Russian point of view. So some of the stuff will have to get done sooner rather than later, if any of it is accepted. There are obviously hard no's that are built into it, but this is the beginning of negotiations. From your point of view,
nothing's changed from the Russians' point of view. Nothing's changed. It's mostly changed on the other side. And it was changing all along. As Lavrov and Marco Rubio discussed, and Lavrov, I'm pretty sure he's accurate on this. He brought this up. The situation really was dicey because Trump went right and met with the Europeans and then seemed to change his mind from Alaska. But what Rubio did was assure Lavrov that no, it wasn't a change of mind. It was a tactical move to at least keep them at bay for the interim period, and that he wasn't about to sign up to the European plan, if you will, which is simply to keep the war going at all costs. Yeah. And that's across the board, and it's certainly the point in Brussels. So they had to deal with that, and that's kind of, I think, what derailed Budapest, because they weren't ready and hadn't started to deal with that yet. Now they've started to deal with it, at least I'm told they have. And what that deal is go to hell, Europeans. We're going to effect a peace agreement, and Donald Trump is going to get credit for it. And it's going to be his umpty-umph war that he has settled. And he's going to get the Peace Prize, all that garbage. But they are serious, I think, and they're serious in three very important ways. Zelensky doesn't matter anymore. He needs to get out of the way. And if he doesn't, someone will get him out of the way. Two, the Europeans are dead wrong, and they're going to fall apart politically anyway, so we can watch them fall apart and hope they don't turn into a 1930s Europe again, particularly Germany. And three, we need to do this because there are bigger issues by a quantum leap than Ukraine. And Ukraine is keeping us from these issues, not least of which is nuclear weapons. And we have a propensity in this particular conflict to even experiment with the use of those weapons. And that's not where we want to go, either of us, Moscow or Washington. And they're seized of the seriousness of this and the difficulties. And here's what I think is going to really take some work and maybe impossible. You get the situation stabilized momentarily, and maybe you can do that. And with Trump weighing in heavily on our side, we probably can do that. And basically the confines or the limits or the map of that settlement is what Russia wants. And of course, not what some Ukrainians want, particularly the Nazis. So you're going to have a situation where some cessation of hostilities occurs, major casualties stop being produced on both sides. You have exchanges of bodies and prisoners and all things associated with a reasonably good agreement, but the Nazis won't leave it alone. So they've been the fly in the ointment all along, and the United States in particular, but Europe in general, has been using them unconscionably, using these people who were Hitler acolytes, who persecuted the Jews in Poland, who did all manner of damnable things and will do them again, will not let this peace adhere. So you're going to have constant battles along the so-called line of peace, if you will, because these people will not let it rest. And that's one reason you need to get rid of Zelensky, because he's in their back pocket with corruption and all the rest that they represent. And you need some kind of process set up that legitimizes a reasonably democratically elected leader of Ukraine, and who can then take over and bring some sort of pressure to bear on these people. It won't work completely, I guarantee you, because these people are relentless. They are Ukraine's problem for centuries, and they're just in the personification of the Bandera gang a few years later. But they're the same people. They're the same people. They're the Jew-hating, anti-Semitic. Everybody in Europe is foul and criminal and stupid and dumb except us people. And they will not let this thing be a success if they can do anything about it. So that's going to be the long-term impediment to this agreement. Not the Russians, not the Ukrainians in general, but these Nazis. And all along, Putin has been right about these people. And all along, we have been exploiting them for our own reasons, basically making money off the war and bleeding Russia.
How much clout does Europe have in this process? Can the U.S. tell them to go to hell?
Less and less clout. less and less. Merz is making a fool of himself with this going towards 5% of GDP. He's making the AFD the future of Germany and whatever coalition they can put together. Macron is a dead man walking, and Starmer's an idiot who has the lowest poll ratings in the history of Britain's Labour Party. So they aren't for long. You know what happened in the Netherlands? It's going to happen all across Europe. These rightist governments, that's what I'll call them, are going to be thrown out. And we just have to wait and hope the turmoil in the aftermath is not so great that it turns Europe around on its head, so to speak, and puts it back in the 1930s, not able to do anything in a unified fashion.
So the Europeans stomping their feet, it's not going to be, assuming for the moment that Donald Trump is being serious, because taco, right? The Europeans themselves are not an impediment to pushing this through if the United States throws its weight around in order to push this.
I missed what you said was the impediment.
Well, I'm asking is Europe, I guess the question I'm trying to frame it in the sense of, so the Europeans are not an impediment to if the U.S. decides to assert itself and try to get
they
a
are.
deal.
They are. There's no question about that. There's still enough ammunition left in them, if you will, to be really harmful. But I think if we just plow ahead, and Trump is wont to do that once he gets the bull in his teeth or the whatever in his teeth. Yeah, I don't know what to say about him. He's such an awkward character. And I'm really worried now. I shouldn't say I'm worried. Maybe I'm ecstatic. The guy's got real physical problems and apparently mental problems too. And I'm hearing more and more about it from inside the White House. He's ill. Let's put it that way. I don't know how badly, but I don't think he's going to make it through the 4 years. And then the question becomes, was Tucker Carlson right when he advised, you ready for this? Maybe you've heard about it. Tucker Carlson advised Trump not to pick Marco Rubio as his vice president, but to pick Vance. And when he was asked why by Trump, Tucker Carlson said, because if you pick Marco Rubio, they'll assassinate you.
Yeah.
Think about that. Think about that. The ultra neoconservative, they'll assassinate you because they want the neoconservatives, they want Rubio in the Oval Office.
Well, that brings up another question, the blob, as some people call it. I mean, you were part of an administration. You could see how those things move, the military-industrial complex, in the words of Eisenhower. What effect does it have on presidential policy? Meaning, I get the president is a power in and of himself in regards to executive authority and everything else. But how much does the blob affect, let's say, how the president moves, what the president does, the levers or the leverage that they can use against the president?
Significantly, too much, significantly and too much. Because you take people like the Big Five or the Big Six, which include the largest warmongers and war merchants of death, I call them, in the world, top amongst which is Lockheed Martin. But then you've got what used to be Raytheon, now RTX. But every time I talk to anybody from RTX, they say, we're still Raytheon. But Lockheed took them under their wings, and they call them RTX. And Grumman and Boeing and all the rest of the characters, they swing a heavy weight with the Congress. And though we don't think this Congress swings a heavy weight with the president, in terms of the chairman of the effective committees, like the Senate Armed Services Committee and the House Armed Services Committee, and even the budget committees, correspond with the wishes of these people because they get huge amounts of donations from them. They're the open donations, and that's probably about 25% of the money they actually get because of all the black money that flows. But if you look online at the open donations given by defense contractors to the chairman of these critical committees, you'd be astounding. I mean, they're buying them. They're buying them just as surely as AIPAC buys them. And boy, do those interests sometimes coincide, because one of the things that Gaza is doing too, and Lebanon and Syria and Iran, one of the things it's doing is energizing these people to make even more money for their shareholders. If you've seen their shareholders' profits lately, especially Lockheed Martin, they're literally off the charts in terms of a business set up to do, fair and just business. They exploit their own stock prices by inflating them and buying back their stocks and so forth. And their shareholders are enjoying profits that are astronomical when you think about what should be the ups and downs of a capitalist society. They have no ups and downs. Ever since we went to war against Al-Qaeda, they have been making money at percentages that are just astounding. And so, yes, they have enormous influence even on the president because they give a lot of money to political campaigns other than Congress.
Wow. Okay. And Congress at that point exerts, let's say, leverage against the president in order to get the president to move a particular way. Basically, they attack the president to go after him. Oh, my God, he's giving up on Ukraine. Ukraine was going to win it if it wasn't for Donald Trump.
Yeah, look at Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham is a recipient of this kind of money. And he also, I think, has ideology that's just poisonous. But he is very much in favor of these defense contractors making even more because it fulfills his neoconservative agenda.
Mm-hmm. What do you make of this? I don't know if I'm going to call it an attempt to oust Zelensky, but definitely this political turmoil in Ukraine. I mean, some of it is a little bit ridiculous, kind of. I mean, if you think of Ukraine is one of the most corrupt countries on the planet.
Yes.
And hundreds of billions of dollars have gone into Ukraine. Billions with a B. And the NABU, who's supposed to be looking out for corruption, is like, we found $100 million that was stolen. And it's like,
that's all you found?
Right. Right. It's like, that's all you found out of hundreds of billions of dollars that was coming into Ukraine. It's a bit funny, right?
Let me back up and tell you just how bad this is, Jamal. NATO, the alliance, had a stricter set of criteria for entry than the EU. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
It required everything from a political apparatus that was fundamentally liberally democratic and looking and feeling that way every day, and with the social institutions underneath it to prove it. It required anti-corruption policies that were hardcore and going after corruption with a vengeance. It required all manner of things. In fact, I once said to Colin Powell, you know, if you had to follow this for entry into NATO, America wouldn't make it in. And he laughed, but he realized what I was saying. We waived all of that. We waived it for some of the biggest criminals in the world, in Albania, in Montenegro, and in Ukraine. We were getting ready to, and we were still a year ago, and certainly under Joe Biden, willing to waive it all just to get them in because we wanted to bleed Russia by doing that. That's how much we prostrated ourselves before our own demands and principles. We just threw them out the window. And we said, anybody in NATO who wants to come one, come all. If you're opposed to Russia, especially come now. Yep. And that's how we built this expansion of NATO into 31, 32 countries now. And not most of them, but many of them are foul as the night. And they're corrupt. And Ukraine is at the peak of that. In 2002, 3, 4, and 5, Powell put me literally in charge of the North Korean portfolio for him, and he put me into the Ukraine portfolio. We concluded in the best working group I've ever been a member of, the North Korean working group, that North Korea was a criminal state. And we defined that very carefully. Everybody in the interagency group was in that working group. Secret Service, FBI, all the intel agencies. Mm-hmm. And we concluded they were a criminal state. What were they doing? They were counterfeiting U.S. $20 and $100 bills to the tune of $20 billion a year. They were counterfeiting U.S. cigarettes to the tune of the California tax stamp. The New York tax stamp was on the cigarette package. It looked genuine, and they were flooding the United States with these cigarettes. Criminal state, we concluded. Their hard currency was gained through criminal activities. I was looking at Ukraine out of my other eye, so to speak. They were just as corrupt. They were just as corrupt. And now we're talking about them as being great Democrats and all this stuff. Bullshit. They're corrupt as hell. And what the Ukrainian people, God bless them, that have been suffering in this war and dying and being wounded in this war, are discovering now is just that fact. So Ukraine might be in a position to get rid of Zelensky, get its act together, and actually begin to become somewhat democratic. And first thing they got to do, of course, and you just named it, is get rid of this corruption, which is as bad as North Korea.
So is it your point of view that given that Donald Trump has put out this 28-point peace plan, that it's the United States that has effectively been, that has enabled NABU to go after the internal clique of Zelensky at this point? Basically, we need to weaken him in one sense internally and then put this deal out externally to try to force Ukraine to take the deal. Is that the way you're looking at it? Or do you think
in that detail, I don't know if we're that savvy, that smart.
Okay.
But that would be a natural concomitant, if you will, of being forceful and wanting to put this deal in place with Putin and seeing Zelensky as an obstacle.
Interesting.